This question is asking us to factor that polynomial function completely, given that x plus 2 is a factor. So they're giving us one of the factors and asking us to find the other ones, and write them all side by side as our answer. So what we need to establish first is that if x plus 2 is the factor, right, the factor is x plus 2, what is the 0 that would be associated with that factor? So the way we find the 0 is by taking our factor, setting it equal to 0, and then solving it for x. So if you set that equal to 0 and then subtract 2 from both sides, x would equal -2. That's our 0. The reason we do that first is so that we can use synthetic division instead of long division. Long division takes a while and there's a lot of places to make errors. We'd rather use the 0 and synthetic division because we're better at it and it's faster. So we're going to take that -2, that's our 0, and use synthetic division with this polynomial. So check your polynomial, make sure you haven't skipped over any terms, which we haven't here, and pull down your coefficients. 3, -4, -28, and -16. Skip a little space and do the synthetic division. So you bring down the 3. 3 times -2 is -6. -4 plus -6 is -10. -10 times -2 is +20. Add those together and it's -8. -8 times -2 is +16. And when you add these last two terms together, you get 0. We get no remainder, which is what we were expecting, right? We knew that one of the zeros was -2, so this had to work. So now we need to write our depressed polynomial. The reason we call it a depressed polynomial is because it's going to be 1 degree lower always than the original polynomial that you started with. So if we started with x to the third, our new polynomial will have x squared. So our coefficient is 3, x squared. Our next coefficient is -10. We fill in an x next to it, and then our last is -8. This polynomial, 3x squared minus 10x minus 8, is the other factor. Next to it, we'll write the factor that they gave us at the beginning of the problem, because it was asking us to factor completely. We need to include all the factors here. But we can't stop. We need to look at this depressed polynomial that we came up with and see if we can factor it further, which we can. The method for this one will be splitting the middle term. It may have been a while since you've done that, so let's review it. We're going to have to take our a and our c, multiply them together. 3 times -8 is -24. We're looking for what makes -24 that adds up to -10x. 6 and 4 is not going to work, so we'll have to use -12 and +2. What we do with that -12 and +2 is actually split up this middle term. It used to be -10x. We're going to split it into two pieces, a -12x and a +2x. If we put those back together, we would get -10x. So we've split the middle term. So we bring down the first term and the last term around it. Now we have 4 terms in a row. So we can factor it by grouping. See what you can take out. From here and here, I can take out a 3x, which will leave us with x minus 4. From here and here, I can take out a 2, +2, and that will leave us with x minus 4. Sure enough, we got the same thing twice. So we can write our final answer as x minus 4 comes down first. In a second set of parentheses, we'll write what's left, which is 3x plus 2. And then don't forget to bring down the factor that they gave us at the beginning, so that we have all of our factors side by side here. If you took these 3 factors and FOILed them all back together, multiplied them all back together, we would end up with the same polynomial we started with. This is just a factored version of the same thing. So all 3 of these together make our final factored answer. This next question gives us one of the zeros instead of one of the factors. And it's asking us, instead of just to factor it, to find all the other zeros. So it'll just mean at the end that we'll have to go one extra step and actually solve each of the factors so we can find our 3 answers. So they're giving us right at the outset that x equals 3. This is the 0, right? The 0 is x equals 3, which means the factor that's associated with that would be x minus 3, because if you solved that, you'd end up adding 3 to both sides and getting a +3. Which one do we want to use in synthetic division? we definitely want to use the 0, right? We can't use a factor in synthetic division. We can only use 0. So let's set up our synthetic division problem where 0 is positive 3. Check your polynomial, make sure you have all your terms there, nothing is skipped over. And then bring down your coefficients. 1, -2, -23, and 60. Do the synthetic division. Bring down the 1. 1 times 3 is 3. -2 plus 3 is 1. 1 times 3 is 3 again. Add those two together, get -20. And -20 times 3 is -60. Add those last terms together and get a remainder of 0, which is what we were expecting. Let's fill in our depressed polynomial here. Started out as x to the third, so we'll now have x squared as our highest term. So 1x squared is just x squared, plus 1x, or just plus x, and then -20 as our constant term. So this is one of the factors. The other factor is the one that they gave us at the beginning, so x minus 3. I like to have all my factors written out, even when it's asking me to find the 0, so that at the end I see my 3 factors, I can get my 3 answers. We have to check and see if we can factor this one further. This is a nice easy one to factor in our head. The x squared breaks into x and x, and we're looking for what multiplies to make -20 and adds up to +1. So we know 5 times 4 is 20, so we need to just fill in the correct signs. So our 5 will have to be positive so we can get this +1 in the middle. So that's 5 minus 4. Don't forget to bring down the other factor, the one at the beginning of the problem. And now you see your 3 factors in a row, and you get your 3 answers, your 3 zeros. This one would be x equals -5. This one would be x equals 4. And this one would be x equals 3. And this is what the problem was asking us for. Just so you understand what those 3 values are, if you were to graph this original polynomial function, you know it was an x to the third function, so it's going to start down low and end up high. But what it's going to do in between is pass through each one of these zeros on its way. So it's going to start from down low and pass through -5, which is right here. It's going to go up and turn around and come back down at +4. Excuse me, it's going to come back down at +3 and then turn around and go back up through +4. So its path is going to look something like this. It'll go up, it'll turn around, and it'll end going up. So what those 3 values represent is a little roadmap to what this function is going to do on the graph. This last one is asking us to do the same thing, it's just putting it in a different way. It's giving us a function and saying, find the other zeros of f, given that f of -2 equals 0. Well, this is just another way of saying that one of the zeros is x equals -2, right? This value right here. When x is -2, you get 0. That's what that's saying. So if the 0 is x equals -2, the factor associated with that is x plus 2. Because you would subtract 2 from both sides to get that -2 value. But again, we're using synthetic, so we want that 0, not that factor at the beginning. So our 0 is -2 there. It goes in the little box. Check your polynomial to make sure you haven't skipped over any terms, and then bring down your coefficients. Do the synthetic division. 2 plus -2 is 0. 0 times -2 is 0. Add those together. Multiply -9 times -2 is 18, and the remainder is 0, just what we were expecting. Fill in your depressed polynomial. It started out as x to the third. It'll now be x squared as our highest term. So 1x squared is just x squared. We don't need to write this middle term because it's 0, right? 0x is just not important to write. And then the -9 comes down here next to the x squared. This is one of our factors. Don't forget to fill in the other factor, the one that they gave us at the beginning, which would be x plus 2. Now we have to see if we can go further with this x squared minus 9, which you should recognize is the difference of 2 perfect squares. When we factor that, it's x plus 3, x minus 3, and the other factor that they gave us of x plus 2. Here are our 3 zeros, x equals -3, x equals +3, and x equals -2. It's the one that they gave us. These are the 3 answers. You can stop there. But again, just so you can see how that would illustrate on the graph, this was another x to the third function. So it's going to start down low and end up high. It's going to go through those three values. So now the first thing it's going to hit is -3, right, this value. And then it's going to go back down through -2. And then it's going to go back up when it hits +3. So our function is going to follow a path that looks something like this. It's going to come up, go back down, go back up, and end going up to infinity. So it's a little bit of a roadmap. Later on, you'll be asked to graph using that.